Hello everybody, my name is Steve and I build scale models. There, I've said it. What I want to do today is to introduce the idea of building scale models, the techniques, etc. to people who are total beginners, are thinking of doing it. Maybe you just started, maybe just bought a kit, or maybe you just think it might be an idea. So what we'll do is very quick. I'll tell you first what I'm not going to do, and that is sit here and build a model while you watch me, because that will just bore everybody silly, including me. So I will go through the basic tools that you need, some basic techniques, how to get started, how to avoid the worst pitfalls that beginners fall into, and then expand it into where you go from there. When you've finished your first model, what do you do with it? How can you expand? How can you turn it into a real long-term hobby instead of just I built a kit? So to begin with, you will need some basic equipment, and I will just show you what I've got on my bench, which is just the basics. First of all, you'll need some glue. You'll need something to cut the parts off the sprue, something to hold it together while the glue's drying, and things to clean it up. First thing to do is all the parts come on a sprue and you cut them off. Now in the old days when I was a kid, we used to twist the pieces off, and although that works most of the time, more often than not it will leave some damage to the part you're trying to build from. So use a pair of cutters. Now you can go to a model shop and buy something expensive like this, or you could go to Superdrug and buy some cheap nail clippers which work just as well. Or you might have a partner that uses nail clippers that you could sorry, I didn't say that. Now you'll notice that all these clippers have one thing in common. They have one very flat side and one tapered side, and the idea is they cut right at one edge on this flat side. The nail clippers are built exactly the same way, which is why they work just as easily. I'll do a little demo in a minute. We'll just cover everything else on the table first. Having removed the part from the sprue, you then need to clean it up with a sander stick like that. Again, you can buy sander sticks from model shops for a lot of money. Or you can go to Superdrug or Poundland and buy these things, which are nail buffers, for a fraction of the price, and they work just as well. You might need to use a knife. We don't usually recommend using a knife unless you know what you're doing. It's a very sharp knife, and it would be nice to have the complementary tool handy as well. Now, when you put the parts together, you need something to hold them while the glue dries. So, little clips, these are available quite inexpensively from all sorts of places. And clothes pegs, of course. Every house has got clothes pegs in it, and they work quite well as. And masking tape for the bits that the clippers won't stick round. Masking tape is good because you can peel it off at the end when the glue's dry, and you've lost you've got no sticky residue to get rid of. Cocktail sticks are complementary to the glue. I'll come to those later, and I've got here some various types of glue, which again we'll come to later. So we'll just be going through this. By the way, feel free to put any comments or questions you like in the chat, unless of course you're watching this as a recording, in which case I won't see it. But I'll do my best to answer questions as they come up, or at the end, and we'll have perhaps a question and answer session. Right, so if I take a sprue, This is a leftover piece from a model I finished some time ago. And what we have here is an alternative arm for a Roman soldier. The arm comes in two pieces, so using my nail clippers I can just go clip and clip, and the part is off. Now if you just run your finger along the edge where it was clipped, you will find there is a little bit of a blemish, which I can take off with one of these. Simply file it down till it's smooth. Same with the other part. That wasn't supposed to happen. I'll ignore it. Okay, so we have a ringing phone, excuse me. Right, we now have a phone that's not ringing. Anyway, the two halves go together. Now in this particular kit, you can see the fit is not brilliant. And the part doesn't hold together naturally. When I'm holding it with my fingers, as soon as I let go, it'll fall apart. And that, of course, will also happen when you've got the glue on it. So, first piece of advice, before you glue anything, make sure it fits dry. And find something to hold it with. And in this case, I don't think the clips are going to work very well. Because of the shape, this is probably one that will need masking tape. Or you can hold it with your fingers. You can put the glue on and hold it with your fingers, but then you've got to stay like that till the glue dries, and hope you haven't stuck your fingers to it as well. I'll have another go with my... You can see what happens as soon as I put the clip on it. It slides apart. So, having shown you the difficult bit, I can tear off a piece of masking tape. I should have rehearsed this better, shouldn't I? Piece of masking tape on there. That goes on there. And that will now hold together. So if there was glue in there, you know, stay. And you can see that even after it's fitted together properly, there's still a bit of a gap there. That will need to be filled and sanded down later. I'll come to the use of filler and sanding later. Now I'm not going to put any glue on here because that will get messy. So on the subject of glue, you might get glue coming with the kit, in which case it might be in one of these little tubes. Or might be in one of these. These are nicer, and you can buy these in model shops as well. They have this long metal tube on the end, which means you can get a very precise location for the glue. However, this type of glue, standard polystyrene glue, it works by melting the plastic and welding it together. So obviously you do not want to get it on any of the surface that is going to be visible. You have to be very careful, and if you take something like this, you will try and put the glue just on these surfaces here where they're going to touch, and not get any out here where it's going to be visible, because once it ruins the surface it's almost impossible to get it right again. One way of the other feature of this type of glue is it's a bit like tomato ketchup. You can squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and get nothing out, and then suddenly half the tube comes out in one glob. So again, we have the cocktail stick. A little bit of glue on the end of a cocktail stick, and you can very precisely place it on a part like that. And you can see exactly what you're doing and put tiny amounts. And you do really literally only need a tiny amount of this sort of glue. Now this is brilliant for gluing plastic to plastic or polystyrene to polystyrene. If you're gluing anything else, you've got super glue, UV settable glue, which I'll come to in a minute, which is really good, or good old-fashioned PVA school glue, which you can buy for practically nothing in places like the Works. And it's surprising how many people use PVA to put models together, and it works really well. The other type of glue you can get is extra thin. Now this is a liquid. You put it on with a brush, which comes with the bottle. And the technique for using that is that you put the two parts together and put the glue on afterwards. So, see, I've got the two parts together. You can very quickly run the brush around the edge. That's all you need to do. Capillary action will suck the glue inside, and it will stick in sometimes no time flat. Let's see if it's stuck already. And then I would go around the other side and repeat the exercise on that side. It's just a bit more expensive than the standard glue, and you'd have to still be careful with it. Make sure you don't spill it anywhere it's not supposed to go, but it will stick quite quickly. If you need to put anything metal or anything that's not polystyrene, super glue is very good. However, it sticks fingers, tweezers and other things like that much better than it sticks to plastic. Well-known fact. Well, this stuff, which is a fairly new type of thing, it's a bit expensive, but it is really good. UV setting glue. It comes out as a jelly, very similar to this sort of glue, and it won't set until you shine a UV light on it. There's a little torch that comes with it. You switch it on, UV light, about 5 seconds, and it's rock solid. Really good stuff. And that has the advantage also that it doesn't ruin the plastic. Now, the problem I said about getting this sort of glue onto surfaces that are visible, now that's especially difficult if you've got clear parts, windows in cars, cockpits on aeroplanes, that sort of thing. And it's very easy to completely fog a piece of plastic, piece of transparent plastic, just by getting too much of this glue in the wrong place. This stuff doesn't fog the windows, works well, and the UV light will go through the clear plastic to wherever the glue is and cure it nicely. But also, a lot of people, for the clear parts, use PVA, which dries clear. So even if you get it on the clear part, when it's dry, it's clear itself anyway, so, you know, not such a problem. Okay. No questions yet, a couple of hellos. So I shall move on. Right, other things you could find useful: elastic bands. Oh, and I forgot to mention what's on the bottom here, this cutting mat, which protects the table. Now, when you watch model making videos normally, you will see a lot of benches with really clean, pristine cutting mats, straight out of the shop, not damaged. As you can see, mine's seen a bit of use, and it's a bit messy, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what it's for. It's to protect the table from spilt paint and glue and anything else. Also, cutting on that, if you do have to cut through anything, it won't ruin the blade of your knife, as tabletops and bits of glass will. So well worth getting one of these to start with, to use as the base for your modelling. Right, where are we now? Looking at my notes. Let's switch cameras back again. Okay, right, here I am, back again. Right, now, first thing you do, what is the first thing you do? Open the box. Look at all these little tiny bits of plastic. I wonder where they all go. Oh, this looks complicated. Read the instructions. It might sound silly, but read the instructions. Because, yes, you do sometimes get instructions that are a bit naff or a bit incomprehensible, but the vast majority of kits, the instructions will tell you how to put it together in the right order and do it properly, and they're usually clear and concise. So always read the instructions first, so you know what you're going to do before you do it. The parts, I don't know if you can see on this, probably, oh yeah, I've got my cutters tangled up with my screw. Yes, I've got another screw here from another kit. I don't know how well you can see that, but stamped into the screw, for instance, just there, is a number. Really doesn't show up because the plastic's black. But when you, in the instructions, each part will be identified by a sprue identity and a part number. So you look on the sprue, you find its identity. It's usually a letter, so it might be sprue A, part 7. So you look for part 7, and then you know you've got exactly the right part. And it's especially important because if you look at these two here, for instance, you've got two sets. They're a left and a right half of something. And in this instance, I don't think it matters because they look identical. But sometimes you get a left-handed and a right-handed part, which might go on the left and right wheels of a car. And if you get them the wrong way around, nothing else will fit. And they look so similar that trying to line them up by eye is not going to work. So read the instructions, use the part numbers on the instructions, and 99 times out of 100 you can't go wrong. There's always an exception. Right, so having glued your model together, you might want to paint it. In fact, you probably will want to paint it because the bare plastic is just one colour. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate painting because there are hundreds of videos on YouTube and everywhere else, all for free, all showing you different techniques for painting. And if you ask 20 modelers how do they paint a model, you'll get 20 different answers. So you might want to use a brush, you might want to use an airbrush. A lot of modelers swear by airbrushes and think that's the only way to paint a model, but there are lots of people out there also getting really good results from a brush. So I'll only say two things about painting. One is use a good primer, and you can get such things as, that's a colour paint, but in these sort of rattly cans primers from model shops, you can go to Halfords and get car primers. They work just as well. and they're a bit cheaper. Spray the whole model with a good primer, regardless of whether you're going to use an airbrush or a brush. A good primer is essential. Otherwise, you get finger marks and grease marks on the plastic that cause paint to not stick very well. One thing you will find also as soon as you put a primer on is how many of your joints are going to show. Because once everything's the same colour, any joins which haven't lined up properly, like a Roman arm again, like that. If you can see, because the camera won't focus, of course. There you go. You can see there's actually quite a gap. Come on, focus, you stupid machine. There you go. Okay. Anyway, but once you prime something, they will really show up. And where you put filler in and you've sanded down the filler will always be a different colour from the plastic. So again, that will show up once it's all the same colour again. So having put your primer on, you might want to do some more work smoothing things down. Primer over the bit you've sanded off. Then put your paint on with either a brush or an airbrush, it doesn't matter. The golden rule for all painting, regardless of how you're putting it on, lots of thin coats works better than one thick coat. You get much better results with a lot of thin coats. Might take longer, it might be a bit tedious, but it does work. So, as a beginner, starting out in the hobby, what do you need to avoid? Firstly, anything complicated. Try to start off with a nice simple kit, even if it's a kiddie one, just to get your hand in, just get into the habit of it. Just find out if you like. You might build one model and think this is boring, I don't want to do it, and go away again. So don't spend a lot of money on something expensive and complicated at first. Choose something simple. Don't set yourself up for a failure. Gradually build up. Two things to avoid, particularly when you're a beginner: biplanes and sailing ships. Both of them are a nightmare, even simple ones. So we'll have a biplane here, as you probably noticed in the background. Now, the problem is always the top wing, which is held on by these struts, which are all loose pieces of plastic and all have to be glued, and trying to hold it all into shape while the glue dries is a nightmare. It's a technique you will get better at, but it's not something you want for your first model. Pick something a lot simpler. Okay. Then there's the decals. Everything has decals on it. Oh, except this one. I've actually painted the markings on this one. But normally all these sort of things, the roundels, registration numbers, will all be decals. And put them in you cut out the decal sheet, you put it in a glass of dish of water. Somewhere. This is actually the decal sheet that should have gone on that aeroplane. I didn't use it. But that's a longer story. So you cut out the individual pieces. Don't try and do too many at once. Wait until they slide off the backing paper and gently slide them onto the model. Not easy. And some decals are better than others. Some will just go on and sit nicely and stay there and be wonderful, and others will fall apart as soon as you look at them. Some will decide that your finger is a lot more attractive to stick to than the model, or they'll wrap round, and you do get lots of problems with decals. So don't worry if the first lot don't work. Just persevere. The the proverbial cotton bud. There we go. These things are very good for moving decals around. Just push them on using the end of that, or even a paintbrush soaked in water, and then don't touch it until it's dry. You can also buy this sort of stuff, decal fix, which you use instead of water, and it does help. It makes the decal material more flexible, and it will stick to the contours of the model much better, particularly on a model like this one where you've got this sort of ribbing effect on the wings, and getting a decal to sit down in the ribbing so that it looks as if it's been painted on is much more difficult with water than it is with the decal fix. That's just one make. There are others, and different modelers will tell you, will have different preferences. But like I say, ask 20 modelers any question about how they do anything, you'll likely get 20 different answers. So, any questions, anybody? Can't see anything in the chat yet. Yes, varnish. The problem with decals is they need a nice smooth surface to sit on, and even allowing for some ribbing and texturing in the plastic, they still need it to be nice and smooth. Now that can be a problem if you've got something like a tank which has got a matte black paint, or sorry, a matte finish on it. Putting a decal over matte paint doesn't work very well. You get what's known as silvering, which is where you can actually see the substrate of the decal, and the decal looks shiny, and it just doesn't fit well. So what most people do is they actually put a gloss varnish over the matte paint where the decal's got to go, put the decal on the gloss varnish, obviously once it's dried, and then put a matte varnish over the top of the decal so everything is matte, and that gives you a much better effect. But that again might be a bit more advanced. For your first model, just stick the decals on. It'll be good enough. What's important, of course, is that it's your model. You're not doing it for anybody else. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing it for the enjoyment of building it, and it really doesn't matter what it looks like at the end. You've made mistakes. You will make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The trick is not to make the same one twice, because it's not like there's any shortage of new ones out there. And then you'll probably want to weather it. Now, one of the things which advanced model makers all do is put weathering on their models, which means that the model is not pristine, painted exactly as it came out of the factory or the showroom. It looks as if it's been used. A car will have dirty tyres, it will have mud under the wing, mud guards, might have a streak of rust here or there. Aeroplanes will have oil stains, exhaust stains coming from the engine. If it's got guns, you might have blackening around the guns where they've been fired. Tanks, of course, once they leave the road, are always covered in mud in about 5 minutes. So any armoured vehicle often has a lot of mud on it. So and it makes it look more real. I once talked to a guy who worked in the TV industry doing models for science fiction and puppet shows and that sort of thing. And he said making the models dirty gave them weight. It made it look big and heavy and not like a prop, a model. So weathering is quite important, and it's also a good way of covering up decals that haven't worked very well. Now, if I show you, you may have seen that this one, it's the picture we used to sort of announce this session. The decals went badly wrong on this kit when I built it, but you wouldn't know now because all the blemishes are covered in mud. There's mud on the tracks. Oh yes, tank tracks are another thing you'll always have problems with, but we won't go into that now. But you can see most of the decals have got mud streaks over them, which covers up the bits that didn't work. And then the base, well, the base is sort of scratch built. It's just a piece of chipboard with some foam board on the top, some static grass, a few bits of, I think that's actually fluff from a furry toy, and some stones picked up out of the garden, and then a bit of gloss medium to make that bit look wet. But the I'll come to bases in a minute, because that's another area where you can make a model look a lot better without doing anything more to the model. Okay, let's go back to our model aeroplane again. It's a model aeroplane. Okay, it's a model. It's an aeroplane. What else is it? It's just sitting there doing nothing. Now, it's a model of an aeroplane parked in a field. And immediately the impression of the model is so much better. It's parked on grass, which is correct for this type of aircraft. Now, the base, you can hardly get cheaper than this. It's a picture frame from Poundland. It cost £1. Take the glass out, the centre is a piece of this stuff, which is model railway grass mat. And you can, I think I paid £7 for a 3 or 4 metre roll of this. You can see this. I've had this about 4 or 5 years now, and I still keep using it. And the effect is a grass field. You just plonk your aeroplane on at a jaunty angle, and there you go. Because it's not glued down, I'm trying not to tip it so far that it falls off. Well, you get the idea there. So the simplest of bases can make even a mediocre model look so much better. To take a more extreme example, here's a model ship. Right, now, you could build it like that, display it on a stand, and it's a model ship. Here's another model ship. You can put it in its natural environment. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that the model ship here is actually quite primitive. It's a very cheap wooden block, almost a toy, kid's toy type of vessel. But when you first look at it, you don't notice that. If you get the sea right, you can make any boat look better. Against that, you get the sea wrong, and you can make even a good boat look naff. So, right, we've got all that so far. Still no questions. Is anybody still watching? I don't know. If you want to continue modelling, how do you, for your second model, your third model, there are, again, many different ways of doing it, and you want to please yourself. You really want to do what you want to do. It's your hobby, your models. Because the pleasure is in building them. When they're finished, they're just ornaments. Or, as my daughter once referred to that vessel over there, that bloody dust trap. Pardon the language. Now, some people will build the same type of model over and over again. I know some people who only build aeroplanes. They only build aeroplanes from a certain period. They might only build cars. I know others. I'm a bit crazy. I don't like to build the same model twice, so I try to do everything. Every time I finish a model, I'll do something completely different for the next one. I know one guy who only builds Churchill tanks. He must have built about 50 of them. I think every different version of Churchill tank that ever went into production, he's made a model of it. And where there isn't a kit that fits the version he wants to make, he will modify one of the kits that is available. He's never built anything else, never even a different type of tank. And that's fine. That's what he wants to do. And as Christina's just commented, it's interesting how things have moved on. And yes, a lot of things are still the same. The way in which kits are produced is pretty much the same, and the technology is better. The detail that they can now mould in plastic is much finer than it used to be, but it's still injection moulded plastic, and you still have the same problems, the same issues. Anyway, where was I? I was talking about what you want to build, and the choice, I think, these days is a lot better than it used to be. You know, it's still true to say that probably 80% of the kits available are armoured vehicles or military aircraft, but there's an increasing number of ships, and most refreshing, an increasing number of civilian type non-lethal kits available, like cars, motorcycles, trucks, that sort of thing, merchant ships. You know, my dear wife bought me recently a glider. I'm looking forward to doing that one. But you do what you want, what interests you. That's the point. Now, I'm going to move on to another area, kit bashing, scratch building. Use your imagination. You don't have to build everything according to the instructions. For your first few models, yes, follow the instructions, learn the techniques, become good at it. Once you've got a bit of confidence, you can perhaps start to move things around. You know, you buy a kit and it's a Mark V of something, but you actually wanted a model of the Mark II. So you get some books, you look at how the Mark II differed from the Mark V, and you make the alterations. Possibly using parts from the kit, possibly using bits from another kit. Never throw anything away. All kits come with parts you aren't going to use. And these little parts, you'd be surprised what you can use them for. If something gets damaged or doesn't go very well, you can always retrieve it. Now, a long time ago, I found a model kit in a charity shop. It was a Mini Cooper and it had been half built. Now, whoever had half built it, it was as if two people had had a go at it. Parts of it were very well put together and parts of it were not very good. So I cleaned up the bits that were not very good. Took it in the local model shop, talked to it with model club, talked to a few people about it, and when I got home I found the back wheel was missing. Bit of a problem, that. What shall I do? I'll jack it up on bricks. So I made some little bricks, jacked it up, and I thought, oh, why not add a police aware? It's a Mini that's seen better days, it's going to be rusty, isn't it? So it's got rust stains on it. What else I added? Some oil coming out from under the engine, so it looks, you know, W the line, there's parking tickets, that sort of thing. So the parking tickets, incidentally, were little bits of plastic cut from an Asda carrier bag. The police aware sticker is just a piece of paper printed with a normal computer, with an inkjet printer. The log is a twig from the garden. The road surface here is actually roofing felt, and it's got a nicely. It was on a nice base that I happen to have, but anything flat will do. So you can see you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can use your imagination and put things together as you like, really. Don't be overzealous about accuracy, I think is the point. That super duper accuracy doesn't always make the best looking model, which is a strange thing to say, but sometimes being a little bit imaginative with colours and weathering and that sort of thing can make a model look more real than if you copied a photograph of the real thing, which might have been recently polished or just look too clean. So where are we going from here? We've got that. Support, yes. There is a good social side to model making, and one of the things we do at Models for Heroes, where we help veterans and emergency service workers who've got mental or physical problems from their work. We find a lot of the time the social side of the sessions are more important than the model making. Model making is like an icebreaker. If you're a little bit lonely, a little bit isolated, you can go to a model making club. You can always find somebody to talk to, and most clubs, most people will help you. From my experience, people who are really good modelers usually like to share what they've achieved and help others do it. And again, you might not always get the same answer to the same question from everybody, and there's probably no two ways, there's no one single right way to do anything. You do what works for you, and what works for you may not work for the next person. So don't be afraid to try an idea. If it doesn't work, try something else. Same with painting, weathering, and there you go. It's a wonderful hobby for most people who try it. You know, I can't guarantee that you'll like it or that you'll become an inveterate modeler, but look around. Pick a subject you like, a subject that fascinates you, or just something that you find you're good at. It really doesn't matter. And if somebody criticizes your model, well, if it's constructive criticism, then good. If it's not, ignore them. It's your model, you build it the way you want it. And you can't be, I can't emphasize that well enough. The whole point of this is the enjoyment of doing the building. The finished item, what do you do with it? You know, they sit on shelves, they sit in baskets, they gather dust. Maybe you go, you know, sometimes you go to a model show, you see lots of models. You could sometimes get bargains at model shows. Sometimes you don't. You may get lots of ideas, and you may not. But that's it. Social media. If you're on Facebook, search model clubs. When you're putting search strings into Google and such like, you have to be careful with the use of the word model, because you won't always finish up with plastic models. Well, not entirely plastic anyway. So, but yeah, if you look for modeling groups on social media, then you will probably find a mass of different ones, some of which are public, some are private. You can probably join up with them or request membership. And most of them, again, you'll find most of the people will be helpful. If you ask a question, you'll get lots of answers. And if you don't like the group, well, you just leave it and find a better one. You know, there are some social media groups that are full of trolls and people who are negative. But in my experience, the majority of modelling groups are full of people who are really positive and want to help out. So that's about all I had, really. So if there are any questions, thank you, Christine, for thanking me, and thank you for everybody else who watched and didn't comment. And if you have any questions, I'm sure if you're watching this as a recording, not live, then I'm sure that the lovely people at the Virtual Village Hall will forward any questions, and maybe we could arrange another session later to answer them. So let's call it a night there then. Or shall we wait and see if anybody else comments? Which will make for a very boring end to the evening. Right, well, that's it then. I will sit here. Shall we edit this bit out? Oh, there we go.